80 years ago, today, the mighty German battleship Bismarck met his end, in which 3 days after sinking the HMS Hood, the British fleet finally caught up to the Bismarck, resulting in his death, and with him, over 2,000 lives. A legendary chapter of the Second World War that has fired the imagination of generations since then.
From the mist, a ship is taking form, and the silence of the seas are about to
Firstly,
drift
a brief history. On February 14th, 1939, the incomplete hull of the Bismarck was launched in a dramatic ceremony with an enthusiastic crowd that included the Führer himself. Over 2.5 years later, the Bismarck was now ready for its first and only voyage. These recon pictures made by the British were more than enough for the Royal Navy to send 2 of their finest battleships, the new Prince of Wales and the old beloved battlecruiser HMS Hood, in a fateful encounter known as the Battle of the Denmark Strait. The British suffered a catastrophic loss of the Hood, taking all but 3 of her 1,400 crew. Meanwhile, the triumphant Bismarck was, however, damaged significantly by this battle, enough so that repairs were needed back in occupied France, sealing his fate. Multiple strikes from the British carrier Ark Royal were fruitless until a torpedo made a critical hit on the rudder, jamming the Bismarck right to the path of the British fleet, led by battleships HMS Rodney and King George V, where they made an almighty assault upon the Bismarck, which ended with the Bismarck finally slipping beneath the seas, whether it be from the torpedoes of the British cruiser Dorsetshire or scuttled internally by the crew. Out of 2,200, only 114 survived. That was all a brief history, as if all the other documentaries of the Bismarck that are out there on YouTube could tell you that. Now allow me to be honest, I didn't make this video to talk about the history of some old battleship. I made this video mainly to talk about my personal history with the legend of the Bismarck, and learning about the battleship as a kid led to my special interest in battleships and ships of war. Let's go back to 2002. I was 9 years old, and 2 of my favorite subjects were Bionicle and Titanic. This was when James Cameron's epic was still fairly new, and there was quite a bit of Titanic media going on, some of which I've never heard until later. Anyways, it all began when I saw the National Geographic documentary headed by Robert Ballard, the same man who discovered the wreck of the Titanic a few years earlier. Here, he went on the search and found the wreck of the Bismarck. Robert Ballard made a great introduction to the Bismarck, but it was James Cameron's Expedition Bismarck that firmly established the giant battleship's place in my heart and captured my imagination forever. Both documentaries went into great details about the histories of the Bismarck, but it was James Cameron's that actually gave us a close view of the ship itself and actually went inside the ship. And I highly recommend checking out James Cameron's documentary, especially featuring Lance Henriksen as the narrator. He's always had an awesome voice.
The Leviathan finally comes to rest. It has slid down the mountain 2/3 of a mile.
Now let's compare the Titanic to the Bismarck for a moment. Just take a look at both ships and observe just how wildly different the Bismarck and the Titanic are from each other. Of course, they were built for completely different reasons in different times. But a ship with gun turrets was something I never thought was possible. It worked on tanks and armored land vehicles, but boats? That blew my 9-year-old mind. Another documentary I was into at the time was Walking with Dinosaurs, and anyone who has seen that series will never forget this sea monster.
Waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
it was only natural for a 9-year-old me to think of a super battleship with the same name, Lyopleurodon, which turns out would have similarities to other World War II battleships, including the Japanese Yamato and the American Iowa. And that was the beginning of my lifelong fascination with battleships and ships of war, which has led me across America and even the world. To this day, I have a lot of books, not just on the Bismarck, but also in battleships in general. They range from several times and have wildly different art designs. But I just love it, capiche? It has also led me down video games, from early games such as Battlefield 1942 to Battle Stations Midway and Pacific, and quite a few of them. But there wasn't an online game featuring my favorite battleships until World of Warships, which has made more than a few tributes to the most famous battleship of them all. The Bismarck has also been referenced in movies, most notably 1960's Sink the Bismarck, as well as songs such as the Johnny Horton song of the same name, and more recently a hit single by Sabaton. How about that? Almost 8 decades after your sinking, and you get a resurgence thanks to a historic heavy metal rock song.
At the bottom of the ocean, the depths of the abyss, they are bound by iron and blood. The flagship of the Navy, the terror on the seas, his guns have gone silent at last.
I fucking love it, man! I would like to take a moment to argue something which might sound strange to you, but it really applies to myself and my own personal life. To me, the German Bismarck is to battleships as Thomas the Tank Engine is to steam trains. Both iconic machines were the introduction to these outdated vehicles to many people, including myself. Both are referred to as he. That is an actual historical truth with the Bismarck, contrary to maritime tradition. And both, oddly enough, have songs that sing of their phrases, whether it be the classic Really Useful Engine song for Thomas or that Sabaton song. That is the comparison between the boys.
He's the one, he's the one, he's the race for the legend that we are told. He's the one, he's the number one, Thomas the Tank Engine.
And the men.
Sign of power, show of force, raise the anchor battleship, guarding its course. Ride up a nation of beast made of steel. Bismarck in motion, king of the ocean, he was made to rule the waves across the seven seas.
You know what? If Godzilla could evolve from a male violent symbol of destruction into a crazy animal superhero fighting all kinds of giant monsters, then maybe the Bismarck could shed its Nazi past and redeem himself in a similar manner. In actual fact, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party weren't really that big on the Kriegsmarine, with such big warships expensive to both build and maintain. Therefore, despite the fact that that fucking swastika is probably still down there on the wreck itself, I don't see why the Bismarck cannot escape its weak links with the evils of Nazism and become an iconic symbol, if it hasn't already.
Heil me? Come on, for old time's sake. Heil me, little man.
No.
Heil me. Come
No.
on, little heil, just a little heil, please.
Fuck off,
As far as I know, there are very few of the combined 117 survivors of both sides, if there are at all. The majority of them were young men at the time, and now they are reaching the end of their lives, as all the veterans of World War II. So I don't want to disrespect neither the living or the dead that have passed away either on land or sea. May the 3,000 dead on both sides rest in peace, and long live the Hood and the Bismarck.